Hi, my name is Darshan and I'm an online tutor of math and physics. In this lecture, we are going to introduce friction. So what is friction, why it acts, how it acts, types of friction, etc. So we're going to talk a lot in detail about this. We'll draw some curves as well, so that everything is clear, and from lecture to lecture, we are pretty much ready for all the friction related questions. What is friction? Friction is a force which is used for which basically does not like sliding, right? Which basically does not like the motion. So friction is a force which opposes sliding or sliding tendency. What is the meaning of this? Tendency. Okay. For example, let's say we have an inclined, not an inclined plane. I'm going to start really easy. Let's say we have a floor, and on floor we have an object, and let's say this object is hypothetically 5 kilograms, and this is a rough surface, right? This is a rough surface. So there's a friction over here, and a child comes over here and he tries to push this block. So obviously, right, this is a very practical situation that a child cannot really push a 5 kilogram block, because if he's going to push, it will not move. Why will it not move? Because the child is trying to slide this particular box on the floor. So there is a sliding tendency. And like I said, friction does not like sliding. So friction is a force which opposes the sliding. So let's say this child is exerting a force of 2 Newton hypothetically on it. A friction of 2 Newton is eventually going to exert by the floor on the block in the opposite direction, which is 5 Newton, which is 2 Newton over here. So since the forces are equal and opposite, the block is eventually not going to move anywhere. Fine, okay. Obviously, the kid is not able to move the block. The kid is annoyed, so he goes and call his friend. His friend comes here, and then they both push the block, and unfortunately, still the block is not moving. Let's say in this particular case, the kids are able to push that with a force of, let's call it 5 newtons, and a 5 Newton. Okay, let me not take yellow here. Okay, so let's say both the kids are able to push it with 5 Newton, and a 5 Newton force is eventually exerted over here, and obviously the block is not moving. Now both the kids are annoyed. They go and they call, maybe the first kid calls his dad, that dad, this is not moving. The dad comes and dad says that, okay, move aside, and then dad comes and then pushes the block. Obviously dad is muscular, he's able to apply a lot of force on it, and he applies a force of 20 Newton, and the block is eventually able to move. It does not mean, however, and okay, by the way, there's just one thing which I should have mentioned before dad came in. Before dad came in, let's say mom came in, and mom and both child tries to push this block, and they were able to exert a maximum force of 12 Newton here, but the block is still not moving. However, this is now such a situation that a little more force is required for the block to just move. It means that the friction, obviously it's not like the friction will always keep on increasing itself. The block will never move, obviously not. There is a limit to which the friction is able to oppose the motion which can eventually come for a block, which is 12 Newton. So what, so now the dad comes, dad says move aside, and dad now exerts a force of let's call it 20 Newton, and eventually the block starts moving. But like we said earlier, 12 Newton is the maximum friction force which can oppose it. So now 20 Newton is obviously able to supersede or exceed the 12 Newton, and the block will start moving. The question is, do you think when the 20 Newton force is exerted, will the force still be 12 Newton? Now, this is what we have to learn, and this is where the types of friction come in. Now, I'm not going to answer that right now. I'm first going to introduce, so I have introduced what is friction. Now, I'm going to introduce the types of friction, and then I will answer that question. Okay, so I hope you understand what a friction is. Friction is anything which opposes the sliding tendency. Initially, the block was not able to move because there was friction. Then when the 20 Newton force is applied, still the block is, now the block is still, the block is now moving. However, it does not mean that the moving block does not have friction. It still has friction continuously acting on it. So friction is still acting. As far as the types of friction are concerned, friction is of three types, of which we are only interested in two. The third is, eventually comes in a different segment, different chapter. The first type of friction is the static friction. The other type of friction is called kinetic friction. And the third type of friction is called rolling friction. Now, we won't be talking about rolling friction in our discussion. In this course, we will not be talking about rolling friction because that is a separate chapter, a separate concept. We'll talk about static friction and kinetic friction, and together they are called translational friction. Translational friction. These are just the names, but I think I have already introduced both of them without taking the name. Static friction is the friction which acts when the object is at rest. Object is at rest because the friction is not allowing the object to move, because obviously the story till mom comes, right? So one kid, two kids with mom. This is the complete story where the object is at rest. So the friction which was eventually acting was static friction. And when the dad came and the block starts moving, so the friction which acts when the block is in motion. I'm not saying the block is accelerating. I'm just saying it has some speed, right? It has velocity or speed. If that is happening and if there is a friction, this is called kinetic friction. Okay, so static friction, kinetic friction, at rest, in motion. Now, what is the relation? I mean, why this friction, by the way, acts? So just a theoretical point of view, it's like just a theory, right? It's not relevant for numericals. It's just like, because between the blocks which are sliding, obviously they have their own surface, and surface has their own molecules. So basically these molecules on a microscopic level, they interact. And that's why, because of these interaction of molecules, there is a friction. So that's just a basic theoretical concept over here about why friction acts.